I'm going to introduce Liam and Lori. What you guys do is so cool. Oh, by the way, I'm a D. I'm going to be your facilitator today. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. So Liam is the captain of the Astral Ship. So cool. A collaborative art and tech innovation vehicle being developed as a pirate ship inside an old Welsh chapel. In this role, he is leading the voyage to develop, am I saying it right, Engedi? Okay, 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
A project that is revisioning of another historic Welsh chapel as a community makerspace in the heart of one of Wales' oldest towns. Sounds amazing, and I can't wait to hear more about it. Lori manages the Trigonos Learning and Retreat Center and a biodynamic farm. She's the first language Welsh speaker. She's a first language Welsh speaker and a poet with a deep interest in regenerative ideas and helping catalyze bioregional change. This session is really beat me somewhere that is very close to my heart, and I can't wait to start. So I'm just gonna say we have more or less 45 minutes together, and the agenda for today would be, I think we can kind of like start it by connecting. So maybe we can just jump into the keynotes. So we'll have enough time for the conversation. So we're gonna have 2 keynotes, and then we're gonna have a conversation about how do we design communities to be inclusive while supporting a local language and culture, which is something I think we're all really interested in. And then we're gonna jump back and share and just do this kind of takeaway 5 minutes for closing. So Liam and Lori, stage is yours.
Cool, thank you, Adi. Thanks for the introduction. Right, I'm just going to screen share. We've got some slides, and we're going to present these together. So first of all, okay. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of background about Wales, about where we are. So Wales, if this is a map of the UK, see we're no longer in Europe. It's all gone white down there. Wales is this bit here. And it's quite a mountainous region, as you can see. So basically, historically, what happened is we don't really know about what happened after the last ice age, but at some point, the Romans turned up and they kind of conquered all of England and Wales, and then they left, and then the Normans, well, first the Anglo-Saxons, then the Normans came, and what the result is that here in Wales, there's left a kind of indigenous Celtic culture. So there's a completely different language. It's totally unrelated to English. And it's quite an interesting dynamic if you really look into what's going on at a kind of psychosocial way. There's an interesting dynamic in the UK where it's almost like within the Anglosphere, Wales is like the shadow because it doesn't really get talked about very much. And there's some quite, you can kind of see some quite interesting cultural ways that it's almost like it's pretended not to exist in some ways, but I won't go too deep into that. So as you can see, it's mostly mountains, and we've got these mountain valleys. Now we are right up here. This island is the island of Anglesey, and this is where the Druids supposedly made their last stand when the Romans invaded Britain. They brought all their legions up to here, and they had to strike twice to conquer Anglesey. So the first attempt to conquer Anglesey was a failure for the Romans. Which
it took 31 years altogether for them to conquer Wales.
And so they had a fort. It was called Saguntium, and it's near the town of Carnarvon that I'm going to introduce you to in a minute. And this is the kind of bioregion we're interested in. Because mountainous country is generally less connected, there is a kind of cultural, unique kind of cultural group in this area. What's quite interesting about Wales is, although even the UK government refers to it as a country, it's never really existed as a country. It existed in opposition to the kind of invaders arriving in England, creating England as a country, and Wales was just like whatever was left, but it was never really united as a single country in history. There were sort of kings of Wales, multiple tribal groups. Sometimes they were controlling more of the country, and sometimes it was more fragmented. But there is a very strong identity around language, because the Welsh language is so different to the English language. That most of the identity is based around language, and this map is showing the concentrations of first language Welsh speakers, and what you can see is that a lot of the parts closer to England have a lot less Welsh speakers present. And these are often the more populated areas as well. So in a way, it's quite a small cultural group. There's maybe, I don't know, a few 100,000 Welsh speakers?
800,000.
Okay. So there's 800,000 Welsh speakers, but I imagine that maybe less than half of those are actually first language.
I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I don't have the numbers to hand. Okay. So I'm going to hand over to Lowry, and she's going to tell us a little bit about some of the myth and folklore that we have preserved. And some of the oldest written texts in the UK are actually written in Welsh, and they're stories from before the Anglo-Saxons arrived. So over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to touch very briefly on a few of my favourite myths, mostly centred around women. Tales of strong women, of wise women, of magical, mystical, fallible women, and how they represent the enduring kind of feminine nature that I feel is fairly innate in Wales. I think there are some themes that I keep on drawing personally through these stories, in terms of how we move forward and we work towards a more regenerative future. Themes around sacrifice, around cooperation, around resilience, ingenuity, transformation. I have this quote. It was the first line of one of my favourite poems, and it goes, "Cawsom wlad i'w chadw, darn o dir yn dyst ein bod wedi mynnu byw." Ceridwen. Ceridwen was, she possessed the cauldron of inspiration. She had 2 children. One of them was wise and beautiful, the other less so. So she moved to prepare a spell, and in preparing the spell, as the cauldron was being turned for over a year, some of the magic potion spilled onto the thumb of Gwion Bach, who instantly sucked on the potion and absorbed all of the magical powers that she had intended for her own son. So she cast him aside, and there was an ongoing battle of shape-shifting, where he turned into a fish and she became an otter, and then she became a bird, he became a grain of corn, and she became a hen and ate him. And in eating him, she then became pregnant and gave birth, cast that baby aside, cast him out to sea, and he was returned to the land and discovered and became the great poet Taliesin. Taliesin, and through his birth was birthed the awen. You can see this symbol here. It's a symbol some of you might recognise internationally as the sign that's used by the order of Druids, Bards and Obates. But this links all the way back to the tale of Ceridwen, the birth of Taliesin and the birth of inspiration. Awen very broadly means divine, poetic inspiration. And I feel very strongly through the language and through the history that we have here in Wales that that's a very predominant theme Arianrhod, another feminine archetype. She is a symbol of life-giving and also destruction. So I think in a lot of these stories, there is the light and the dark in all of them. Arianrhod was the daughter of a great family. She was offered by her brother to be the foot maiden of Math, son of Mathonwy, but had to prove herself in his court that she was still a virgin. She was made to step over the rod of a magician, and when she did so, she spontaneously gave birth to a son, Dylan, who instantly fled out to sea and made his life in the sea, and another little entity, a blob entity, who her brother spotted first, pulled to one side, took away, raised him as his own, and then returned him to his mother a few years later. She was still reeling from the humiliation of having been offered in marriage and having had to prove herself, and she couldn't accept this son as her own, and she placed a tunged upon him, a tunged being a curse, a voodoo spell of sorts, that he would never have a wife, that he would never bear arms, and that he would never have a name. Three of the cornerstones, I guess, of very early medieval masculinity. So you're seeing there's a vengeful side here. There's the conflict between wanting to nurture and wanting to protect oneself. I'd also like to give a nod to the witches. There's not an awful lot written about the wise women tradition in Wales. Around the time of the witch hunts and the trials across Europe, 1500s to the 1700s, I think most people are aware of how they were vilified, how they were tortured, how they were tried unfairly, and ultimately what their sentences were. What we can, of something that I feel fairly proud of, and I feel there's still fairly strong tradition in Wales of revering that natural earth-generated wisdom, that connection to nature, the medicine ways, the original medicine women. And in Wales, across Europe, only one woman was ever tried and killed for her use of magic, or for using her wisdom. The judiciary, communities, even the non-conformist church system that we had here did, and I hope continue to hold in great esteem the innate wisdom that these women have carried across the ages.
Okay, thanks, Lowery. Back over to me, and I'm just gonna run quite quickly through some of this stuff so we don't run out of time. So this is Carnarvon Castle, and I think part of the reason why there is this kind of like this sort of cultural shadow that I mentioned is because Wales was always to be oppressed by the English, and from a Welsh perspective, it was always to be resilient, to resist, and that kind of tightly bound conflict has existed now for, like, I don't know, more than 1,000 years, and it still exists. So in the 80s, there were terrorists in Wales blowing up holiday homes or setting them on fire. So the tensions are still there to some degree. And yeah, I feel from the Welsh side, the resilience is also a message that can be carried forward in sustainability. But we do need to harmonise the relations. So Carnarvon is quite interesting, and we don't have time to see a clip from it. But if you look on YouTube, you can see a 1969 film of when the Prince of Wales was invested. He becomes the Prince of Wales in Carnarvon Castle, and you can actually see here the chapel we're talking about, Engedi, is just there. So it's like pretty close. But that's quite an interesting film to watch. Very 1969, but it's quite interesting. So yeah, the industrial period was generally quite hard in Wales. There was a lot of Enclosures Act, so a lot of the land that was being used by people for common farming was taken away. People were forced into unpleasant conditions in industry, creating things like here Dinorwig Quarry. But it was certainly industrious people. And so they were under a lot of pressure. I think a lot of people felt in the 1800s they wanted to have another place where there could be a Welsh homeland where they were freer. So there was a Welsh colony that was established, and a lot of the people from Carnarvon were involved. And the chapel in Gedi that I'm talking about was quite central to this. So in the 1800s, this ship, the Mimosa, about 150 people went to southern Argentina, Patagonia, and established a Welsh-speaking colony, which still exists today, and it's kind of a source of national pride that this colony still exists. And so the whole idea that they had was to go and create a new world where our culture can exist. And so what we want to do is build on this metaphor and bring this is the chapel now, bring it back into life as a kind of maker space, cultural art space for creating a new sustainable world right here, not going off anywhere else, but just doing it right here. And yeah, this is the chapel as it was a couple of years ago. There's work being done at the moment in preparation for an art exhibition to kind of take the project forward. But we want it to be a maker space and a connecting space, an art space that would support eco-villages around. So in Wales, we have this legislation called the One Planet Development Policy, which basically means that you can build a kind of zero carbon building. In fact, I've got a little clip of video. I think we've just got enough time. So I'm going to play a little video clip. This is Jane Davidson, who created the legislation.
Yes, for those who don't know about them, just to say a word about One Planet Developments. I introduced One Planet Developments in 2010. One of the key features in many countries is that you can't build on greenbelt land, agricultural land. And I felt that if you were doing something linked to the land where you could get an income from that, and you were prepared to live and commit to a low carbon life, and that meant that you lived in very low zero carbon housing, and therefore effectively you were a one planet pioneer for how we can live for future generations, that you should be given permission to do so. And therefore we have introduced in Wales, and once again it's unique in Wales, but it's gathering a huge amount of interest across the world, the concept of One Planet Developments. There are 45 up and running at the moment, and there's also the first planned eco-village in the UK in Lammas in North Pembrokeshire, not very far from where I live. There is nothing to stop the One Planet Development context and concept being delivered at an eco-village level. There's nothing to stop it being delivered peri-urban communities. And I was absolutely delighted that the Minister for Housing in the last month has absolutely committed to upholding the concept of One Planet Developments. And I personally always wanted that development to go mainstream. So I think that there are some counties in Wales which are more resistant than others, but it is national planning permission in Wales. And therefore there are opportunities for people to do it collectively or individually. Lammas as an eco-village was supported because it was similar agenda outcomes to One Planet Developments, although it wasn't actually a One Planet Development initiative. But there are a number of One Planet Developments that are groups of owners coming together to create opportunities, which are much greater by being collaborative, because then those groups of owners can come together and do different land-based activities, contributing towards their incomes. So I do hope, Liam, that there will be many, many more of these and many more people interested. And of course, there is funding support available through a range of initiatives such as the Ecological Land Movement and the Triodos Bank, etc., which are also looking to create support for similar initiatives.
There was Jane Davis, and she was basically saying that there's nothing to stop the one planet policy being applied at a village level. Policy says that if you're going to live in a kind of zero carbon house and you're going to live from the land, you can do that. You don't need to go through the ordinary planning process if you want to build a house on a greenfield site. So I think it's quite interesting, opens up quite interesting possibilities to design villages, because in order to live off the land, you know, if you're just one family doing that, you kind of need to be working. You can't have the economy of scale that you can have when you have a whole village. So maybe there's a way to design a village that is one planet and bring people together and make that happen. And the kind of motivation of our talk is because, coming back to the bit about culture in the beginning, I feel like if we were to try and do this, and you know, maybe there are ways we could have interesting sort of like crypto ways to sign up and buy a token to be part of a village or whatever, and parachute in a load of external people to suddenly live in a field next to a town, that really what would happen is probably a disaster, as in it would probably, there would be so much reaction from local people that the policy that's there, that's currently not been utilized, would be wasted. But if we could do it in a way that there was a lot of harmony and people felt like incoming people were really integrating into their culture, bringing a lot of benefits, then that would be a good thing. So I think we're kind of on time now. What we want to do is to go into breakouts and just ask you the question: how can we create these inclusive? How can we be inclusive? So include people coming in from elsewhere that maybe don't speak the Welsh language, and how can we do that in a way that still supports the local language and culture and integrates into that culture instead of kind of taking it over? So
and an element of exchange as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds great. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes for the breakout rooms, and then we want to have a bigger discussion back here. So I'm just going to create the rooms. Yes, it looks good. And then, wait, did it happen? Yeah. No. Let me try again. All right, people are coming back. Wonderful. Okay, so I hope you had interesting discussions. Liam and Laurie, do you want to run this part? Okay.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. That we had a great discussion in our group. Does anyone want to feed back, like from group one, that to the main group? What were the main takeaways? As I can. So, for what I don't think we really got to any clear answers. We spent a lot of time in our group. We you know, there are clear challenges, but I think the answers we did find were in the children and the possibility of children and how they can have a kind of integrating ability that maybe adults find harder. So villages should, I believe, should have children. Yeah. I'm not sure everyone else is at that one. Maybe we can have a show of hands. Like if you see yourself being involved in some point in an eco village, is children a big part of it? Thumbs up, or like a small or no part of it, thumbs down? Okay, so we have thumbs.
Well, sorry, I have two kids already, so I mean it would be nice to see them take part in such, and it's quite a beautiful you know, well, thought and dreams and collaboration between like all you guys. Yeah, just to sit in and listen and all, like, to different people talk about it. And sorry, I kind of joined in a little bit late on the session, but
I'm sorry.
so trying to observe a little, listen a little bit and take in a bit and hopefully be able to share, but I thought that was worth sharing.
Another point we touched on in our group was how do we access culture if we're moving into an area that we're not familiar with, moving from cities into the country, in countries where, you know, heritage or, you know, minority languages are in decline. How do you find it? Who are those knowledge and wisdom keepers? And a suggestion was to seek out the elders as much as we need the children in communities. Yeah, the communities need elders, those who hold the stories, those who know the land, who know the history across the most recent generations and beyond. Yeah, the thought was in integrating, especially when there's movement into an area, is to get involved in the local community and find those kind of community leaders.
Yeah, and then I'm not sure if it came through in the video problem, but the One Planet development lets you create a development, a low carbon development, if you can live from the land, and that can include secondary industry. So a lot of the interest in a makerspace is because if you want to create new ways of processing, you know, whether it's food or things you grow, then you might need new machines and new technologies. So a lot of part of the makerspace is going to be in that. And I feel like that's where a lot of the integration can also happen, because often I would say, like, people in that might be coming in are more likely to have higher skill sets. There are obviously some people locally that have some of the skills, but a lot of the knowledge and skills will be coming in. So we need to create an environment where it's feeling like that's their gift. They're giving their gift of knowledge, and the local people are receiving that, and there's kind of a harmony. They're sharing their world. So how we maybe we can find ways to integrate language learning, even if it's I feel like in Wales, just a kind of gesture of learning a few words goes a long way.
Absolutely, yeah.
And because there is definite still existing kind of racism, where you will hear comments like, "Oh, Welsh is a stupid language," for example, or, you know, these kind of things still exist and don't really get picked up despite all the talk about racism we have. The other, sorry, Addie, go.
Okay, I have a silly request. Would you teach us a word?
What would you like to know?
I think thank you is a useful one. But come again?
Thank you is diolch. So we have a CH letter in Welsh, which is so it's DIOLCH. Diolch.
Diolch. Or anyone want to unmute yourself and try saying thank you? Don't be shy. This is how you learn.
Diolch.
Diolch.
Yeah.
And the other one I've got is bracdanau.
Yes.
What does this mean?
Sandwich. So you've got the important things. You can say thank you and you can get a sandwich. And Borada. My three.
Conscious we didn't go to the second breakout group. Do you guys want to share something from your group? If anyone wants to, just unmute and fire away.
Anyone from our group?
Go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived in Wales for a couple of years, and I was sharing that I feel very uncomfortable about this idea of incomers, and I kind of left Wales partly because of feeling like an incomer. Like I felt like every time I opened my mouth, I was engaging a load of history that I wasn't aware enough of to kind of so I'm always really cautious about this idea of sort of bringing in incomers to any kind of existing community. You know, it can feel quite colonial, and so we were sort of talking about you know, if you come into an existing community, where do you start? And you start with asking that community what they want, and then responding from that place. As Tyson Yunkaporta, I don't know whether he's an Aboriginal guy, he talks about this in his book. He says there's these 4 words: respect, connect, reflect, direct. And the respect bit is to always come into a community and find the respect for them first, then connect with them as human beings, and then reflect, and then direct. Whereas often kind of the more Western paradigm is to do it the other way around, to direct and then reflect. Anyway, it sort of always feels useful across the board, not just for, like, you know, even in Wales, that feels like a useful sort of little 4 words to me.
It is. Yeah, I think Santok should become core text for all schools everywhere.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you on that.
I mean, I find that you know, it is difficult because when you live in a culture that's not your culture, and this, I think that there's a little bit of this, you hear this wokeness stuff about equality and we should treat the strangers equally and stuff, but I don't think that's accurate. If I chose to live here, it's because there was something better here that I wanted. And it's very hard for me to say which of the cultural attributes that I don't like is contributing to the thing I do like. And so, you know, if things are functioning well in a culture and you've chosen to live in that culture, it's somewhat arrogant to say, oh, well, they don't treat me equals. Yeah, I signed up for being uncomfortable. It's okay.
Yeah.
That's a lovely reflection. Thank you.
Carolyn, I'd like to ask you, Berlin is obviously a very, very multicultural place. But are there people in Berlin that are sort of fed up with all these foreigners and people not speaking German?
Yeah, thank you for asking this, because this was actually kind of sitting on my lips waiting to be shared. That, yeah, this is totally the case here. I mean, it's funny how, you know, in your Welsh context, and here in Berlin, it's very similar. There's just obviously so many, I mean, it's very multicultural, but there's also a lot of kind of international people who, like, your digital nomads, living and more coming to Berlin. And so there are these kind of parallel universes of just communities of people like, yeah, speaking English all the time. And I mean, I have a lot of international friends, but then people who have partly lived in Berlin now for, 5 or 6 years and still don't speak any German at all. And then there is certainly a certain irritation with some locals about, this fact that, yeah, people who come here to live here and work here, don't just kind of, continue to speak in English in their own language, which can also be perceived as a little bit of ignorance or disinterest, in the local language, in the local culture. And I get it. And I also wondered how to, German is also a difficult language to learn. And I have, international friends who have now, signed up who have been studying German, but they're really struggling. And then the thing in Berlin is that everyone also speaks English to you in the shops, on the streets. Often if people notice that you speak English, they would just switch to English immediately if you're not a native. So it's definitely, because it is so international, also not the easiest then really speak German or learn German. Mm-hmm. But I also wonder what could make it more, what kind of incentives could be there to kind of create more interest in learning the language as well. And probably it is the stories and the kind of, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think actually it's even if we don't have actual children, with the archetype of children, so it's playfulness, making it receptive, so that when you come into this from a subjective viewpoint sort of alien culture, the person feels welcome to play and to explore and to kind of try to use it. And that's where in the English Welsh context, because there has been this past history of conflict, often that environment isn't there. I mean, sometimes it is, and it's great, but that's what we need to nurture, is to make more it's okay to fail, it's okay to try and speak Welsh and sound really rubbish. You have to be, you don't have to be perfect. So bringing that archetype of child and play, even if it's not an environment like makerspaces, probably can't really have many real children in them because of all the dangerous machines.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so we're time conscious and we have a minute left. So where can we learn more about what you do? Where can we connect?
Right, I'm just putting in the chat now. So engedi2.org is the project. Engedi2.org is the project with the makerspace in the chapel that I showed you. There's also astralship.org if you want to look at our kind of parent project. That's the pirate ship chapel, which we are already living in and using.
Breakout.org is the centre that I run. You are all very welcome to come and visit. We're reopening next week. Hooray! After a long 5 months of being closed.
You guys are posting direct messages to me and not to the whole group.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Okay, I was wondering where is it.
Okay.
And I want to invite you all to our Topia platform. I don't know if you visited there. It's pretty awesome, where you can walk around and meet avatars and people and just connect. I'm gonna post.
Okay, no. Engedi2. Let me just type this in again. If you go to engedi2.org and scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can sign up for the mailing list. And this project has kind of been in digesting, fermenting, I'm not sure the word, but for quite a few years now, since I bought the chapel in 2014. It feels like it's going to start to move soon. So please sign up for the mailing list, because I think it's such a big thing that we want to do, sort of really try to catalyze eco-villages at scale in harmony with the local population, but it's something that really needs to happen. And yeah, if anyone wants to ping me, I can get them that link to that video, which I'm, yeah.
Amazing. Thanks everybody for participating. Sorry we didn't have a lot of time to connect in the end, but I think the session was really interesting, and I want to thank you all for coming here and enjoy the rest of your days.
Yeah.
Thanks for hosting, Adi. Toda rabba.
Sure, my
Yeah,
pleasure.
thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Diolch yn fawr pawb.
See you
And
then.
hwyl fawr is a Welsh word. It means big sail. It's a way to say goodbye to somebody, which is wishing them a big sail, because it's, I guess, the sailing culture was prominent.
Amazing. Okay, everyone, have a beautiful day, morning, afternoon, or middle of the night.